Through 8 games, the Seahawks are right at the 500 mark at 4-4 in a three-way tie atop the NFC West. Are they a contender or a pretender at the midway point of the season? We're going to be discussing and debating here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening down in Vancouver, Washington, or you're over in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks falling back to the 500 mark with an ugly 31-10 loss to the Bills yesterday. Now that we've had a chance to revisit the film, the All-22 and the broadcast film, we're going to have our Monday Musings dishing out some hard truths coming out of that ugly loss yesterday and maybe a few positives that sprinkled out of that game as well. This episode coming your way courtesy of Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. For about a quarter, the Seahawks were right with the Buffalo Bills yesterday, and then the wheels fell off. A couple of major mistakes in the red zone, and next thing you knew, the Seahawks were trailing big, 17-3. They ended up losing 31-10 to Buffalo at home, their third consecutive loss at Lumen Field, and then dropping to third in the division. Even though the three teams are 4-4, they are last in the tiebreakers in the NFC West. We are halfway through the season with 8 games played. Rob, looking at the state of this football team now, we've got 9 games left to play, so we're not quite to that midway point. There's not an actual midway point now with 17 games, but we are at the point now where we need to start considering at this stage of the season with how up and down the Seahawks have been, and then coming up this ugly game yesterday, last week, the really good win over the Falcons on the road. It's been such a roller coaster. Is this team leaning towards being a contender or leaning towards a pretender that is on the verge of a rebuild? And this truly feels like a situation where, because the play's been so up and down, that you can maybe make stellar arguments for both sides of the coin, that they very much are still right in the middle of that discussion.
Yeah, I think that they are in the middle of the discussion. However, I think that because of the caliber of play, the skill position talent this team has, both on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, and I'll focus in on defense just for a minute. I think that the secondary play, the Seahawks have some legitimate superstars. I think that they have some studs along the pass rushing front as well. And then obviously on offensive skill position players, we know the quarterback, running back, wide receivers, et cetera, et cetera. Again, because of that, I still believe that this is very much a contender. Now, do I think that they can make a deep playoff run with the caliber of play that we're seeing at the line of scrimmage? No. But at the same time, I think that they are far closer to being a contender that can win the NFC West division rather than being a pretender as far as being a team that I think has to basically throw everything up and start all over again, is destined for a top 5 selection in the 2025 NFL draft.
I almost feel like Two-Face here, albeit without the weaponry, but I almost feel like Two-Face flipping a coin right now. That's how I feel about this, because it's just been so inconsistent. And even in yesterday's game, you and I were talking beforehand, and you and I are not in agreement with this, but this loss to Buffalo actually frustrated me more than the loss to the Giants, which I never thought I would say. But the reason that it is so frustrating is because Seattle had those 2 golden opportunities in the red zone inside of the Bills, and they weren't able to do anything with either one of those opportunities. They got 3 points off one of them, but 3 points with 2 red zone trips like that, and the one coming off a drive that Geno Smith drove them right down the field, 9 for 9, and then Connor Williams snaps the ball so high that I don't think an 8-foot tall guy would have caught that. And then you had the other one where Connor Williams stepped on Geno Smith and he falls backwards on 4th and goal, and they are left without any points. it was so frustrating seeing those missed opportunities and how it just deflated this entire team. In the second half, they looked terrible and they were not able to get anything done. That to me was incredibly frustrating. But that's the reason why I am still leaning very slightly towards the contender status. For one thing, this division does not have a dominant team. You've got 3 teams that are 4-4, and you've got a team that's 3-4. It's everybody clustered together like it's basically week 1 all over again. Nobody's really been able to emerge as a dominant team in that division. The 49ers are banged up. The Rams are banged up, although they're healthier now. They looked a lot better against the Vikings the other night. The Cardinals, you never know what you're going to get with the Cardinals. They're as Jekyll and Hyde as any team in the league, even compared to the Seahawks. And the fact that Seattle had opportunities for this to be a much different game yesterday, and they just keep hurting themselves. I know this joke has been made several times in the past, but some people, it may be long enough ago, it doesn't really track anymore, but they've got to stop Plaxico bursting themselves. I mean, they are self-inflicted wounds over and over and over again for this football team. They are beating themselves as much as what their opponents are. And yesterday, especially in the first half, that was very much the case. So I'm still leaning towards the contender side barely, because there's plenty of reason to be skeptical that this team is going to be able to get to the playoffs and that they can turn things around. At the same time, it's like, gosh, if you could just stop, get out of your own way and just play football and play more disciplined. And it feels like this team could have a couple more wins right now, but they just haven't been able to figure that out early in year 1 under Mike Macdonald. So I'm still very slightly leaning there, but I understand the arguments. And look, we got tons of responses from our fans on this, where they think this team is at right now. And just to read a few, look, we got 100 plus submissions. We can't read them all here on the show, but just a few of the submissions that we got. Brandon at Insano Brandon saying this is an 8-9 team, poorly coached. Mike Macdonald is stretched too thin, trying to help all the inexperienced coordinators, needs veteran coordinators who know their jobs. You can make some compelling arguments for that right now with the inexperience that we're seeing playing out in the field, how that's impacting the preparation of the players on the field. So it makes sense. And then we got this from Red Hand, 7-9 win team is my thinking, 3rd or 4th in the division. That seems to be the popular consensus right now, that this is a below 500 team that is going to be in the race for a while because the NFC West is wide open, but not going to be able to win enough games to get the job done. As far as positivity goes, there are several of our listeners that had 9-8. Tad Helm on X said 9-8, playoffs one and done. Not much run defense or ability to run the ball, self-inflicted mistakes in every part of the game, drop punts, first-year problems, but they're still going to find a way to get to 9-8. And it's because there is a lot of talent on this football team, and there's still plenty of winnable games that are on the schedule. A couple more that we've got here. And this one coming from Coco Kono. Ceiling is 9-8. Reality is 7-10. We have no identity. What are we good at? Until we can answer that, we're a perennial middling team at best. And this one from Football Talk Bo, I had them as a 9-8 team for the season, but the level of play we are getting out of the trenches might make that an uphill battle. It seems like a lot of our listeners are very much in what we call the Jeff Fisher ground, where you're winning 7, 8, 9 games. There's not a lot below that, not a lot above that. Middling seems to be the right word right now.
I think that it does feel that way right now. Again, you're coming off of a disappointing loss. And I would agree with you in the one sense that this was disappointing because it felt like Seattle, with a couple of better plays at critical moments, very much could have been in this football game. And that's despite the fact that they lost the rushing yardage battle. 164 to 32. That's absolutely putrid numbers. But the reason why I'm not as disappointed in this particular loss as I was against the Giants is that I thought the Seahawks were clearly the better team, at least on paper, than the New York Giants. And obviously the Giants wound up winning that football game. I thought the Buffalo was the better team on paper. There's a reason. Vegas agreed. Buffalo came in as a road favorite, a 3-point favorite. That's pretty significant in the NFL landscape to be a road favorite by 3 points. And I think that Buffalo just looked like, this man versus boys at times along the line of scrimmage. And so other than the horrible snap, other than the Geno Smith getting his foot stepped on. I mean, there was a couple of just critical errors at massive moments in this football game. But I also think that, to me, this was a game that's kind of easy to wipe off my memory because it looked like anything and everything that could go wrong for the Seahawks did in this football game. I thought that the kind of a game that epitomized everything was, of course, Josh Allen's fumble that bounces 20 yards and Buffalo recovers. It almost felt like the 45-plus car accident that happened on I-5. And I don't want to make a joke about something as serious as that, but it just felt like there was an awful lot of just one car bumping into another car type of mistakes on the football field for the Seahawks that led to this disaster. I'm not going to stop driving I-5 because of one terrible car accident that happened to a lot of people. I think that it's the same thing here. You can't jump off of a bandwagon when you have a team as talented as the Seahawks are and believe that this is suddenly a squad that should just kind of throw in the towel, give up at this point, and again, hope for a top 10 or top 5 selection in next spring's draft.
When we come back, we are going to dish out our Monday musings. And since there's so many of them, normally this is a one-segment thing on Monday. Look, we got a lot to talk about. We're going to just dive into the offensive side of the ball. That'll be coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're tasked with hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. As a site manager on Seahawks on SI, LinkedIn Jobs is my go-to to post writing positions to land top candidates, and they made the process easy and seamless. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours, and LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. For just one example, they recently launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, which makes the process even quicker for employers. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode of Locked On Seahawks is also brought your way by Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks will keep your lineup live. And Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out your lineup if it isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Go to Prize Picks app today, download it, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. For your second listen, don't forget to check out our friends on the Locked On NFL podcast 2 times a day. In the morning, Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans with your morning NFL Espresso, and then the barber himself, Tony Wiggins, with the second show every single weekday. Make sure to listen to Locked On NFL for your insight analysis that you're not going to find anywhere else. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, Locked On NFL twice a day. Make that your second listen. All right, Rob, let's get into our Monday musings. It was an ugly showing, to say the least, for the Seahawks yesterday against the Buffalo Bills in a 31-10 loss. They were down 31-3 at one point in the fourth quarter. And honestly, it felt like it was worse than that at times in the second half, as they were just getting bowled over by the Buffalo Bills, giving up big plays left and right. We'll get to defense later, though. We got to talk offense first. And this has really been a trend. I actually asked Mike McDonald about this today. I don't know what it is, but this offense just cannot get it going at home, in home games in the first half. If you take out Rayshon Jenkins' fumble return for a touchdown, Rob, this team is averaging 7 points per game in their 5 home games in the first half. So for a full game, we're talking 14 points per game, which would be 31st in the NFL right now. Only the Dolphins at 13.9 points per game would be behind them, and they've been without their quarterback for a large chunk of this season. It has been extremely difficult to watch this offense in the first half of games at home. It's been miscues, penalties, turnovers, you name it. They just have not been able to put it together. And it was really rough to watch again with the Seahawks only scoring 3 points with those couple of red zone trips they had yesterday.
Yeah, and so my suggestion to fix that, to get off to a hotter start, is actually going to seem kind of counterintuitive. I think that the Seahawks need to run the ball. I mean, just simply hat on a hat, downhill, run the ball. It feels like they're getting a little bit too cute with some of the play calling. I know that you want to start off hot. And again, the logic says that you get your quarterback off to a hot start, and then you put the opponent a little bit on their heels. The crowd noise becomes a bit of an issue. Everything kind of goes the way that you're supposed to, except that nothing has been going the way that it's supposed to when the Seahawks start to struggle a little bit. So again, I think that you have to be the aggressor, take the punch to the defense. When you have DK Metcalf on the field, then I think you can make a strong argument that maybe you continue to throw the ball in number 14's direction. But when he was not on the field, to me, the best player that the Seahawks have on offense is at that point unquestionably Kenneth Walker III. You have to get him involved early and often and force Buffalo to have to retaliate against that. And the fact that the Seattle has not had any type of real focus on the running game and highlighting one of their best players, to me, has been absolutely maddening. So again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. I think that the Seahawks' inability to run the ball and stop the run continues to be the biggest concern that anybody who is following this club should have about them. And until it gets fixed, then I think that you're going to continue to see this up and down type of a season from this club.
It's amazing what watching the film can do to change your viewpoints on things, because when we did our post-game show yesterday, I was kind of in defense of Ryan Grubb, saying, look, he was trying to run the ball and it just wasn't working. They weren't getting any push. But then going back and watching the All-22, the word of the day for me, and I'm going to say this a number of times on defense too, disconnect. Disconnect is the word of the day for me coming out of this game. And it also leaks over to offense. And I just want to start with one play. I could sit here and talk about 10, 11 run plays that happened yesterday and have very similar analysis. But the very first run play that the Seahawks had in this game was to start their second offensive drive. They called power out of shotgun. And on a power run, you have a pulling guard that is turning upfield looking for a linebacker. Laken Tomlinson, in this case, he was the puller. Jake Bobo was in the slot, and Jake Bobo crack blocked down on the defender that Laken Tomlinson moved up to get, and it left the corner, Johnson, completely unblocked, and he blew the play up in the backfield. I looked at that play and I'm like, there's total disconnect. And Jake Bobo is a smart guy. Like, Jake Bobo was blocking with conviction. They're like, this is a scripted play. This is in your first 15. It's clearly evident to me that is what's being coached. But I'm watching this and thinking, as a run game guy, as a former running back coach, if I saw that play and I was with my coaching staff, I'd be losing my mind. Like, it's week 8. This is a power play. Like, this is as elementary as it gets. Why do you have your pulling guard and the slot receiver both blocking the same guy and leaving the outside corner to come in and make an easy play on the running back? It is a disconnect that we are seeing. And there was a goal line play where Mike Jarrell, I think Mike Jarrell was trying to do what he was taught to do, but he got completely destroyed by a slant going inside. It just seems like fundamentally that there is a disconnect with the way they are running their schemes, and guys don't know what they are supposed to be doing. That's just my insight, being a guy that has coached running games for a long time. It's elementary stuff that they are not executing. So that it falls on Ryan Grubb and it falls on the position coaches. You got to look at this film and be like, this is not right. Like our run concepts, we're making it so easy for the defense because we aren't running these schemes correctly.
Well, it's not just running the schemes correctly. You just don't have the guys on the field right now that can match up with the Buffalo Bills defense that is bigger and physical and very instinctive. And we talked about this before. Mike Jarrell had a nice NFL debut. But that said, he had a little bit of a soft landing against an Atlanta Falcons team that, as we talked about so many times, was last in the NFL in sacks. And we talked about Greg Rousseau is going to be able to long arm his way into the backfield. And he had 2 tackles for loss. But frankly, he could have had 10. I mean, he just basically was pushing Mike Jarrell around a lot in this football game. And again, when you are essentially have one side of your offensive line in which you cannot turn your back on, have any type of realistic protection in passing game or in the running game, and then you don't have your best wide receiver out there in the field, DK Metcalf. Again, I thought that the Seahawks basically were in a very, very difficult situation in this football game. And so before I switch to DK or again Mike Jarrell, again, one of my criticisms of Ryan Grubb is I really thought this was a game that lended itself to getting the running backs out into the open a little bit more, throwing the ball to the tight end. I thought it was maddening that they didn't see more play action opportunities again to the tight ends, because you had to think that the Buffalo is going to assume that you're going to be focusing on the running game here, and that's going to create some easy opportunities to the tight ends. There were so many times I didn't even see Noah Fant on the field at all. And look, it'd be different if I thought that AJ Barner was a superstar. He is playing pretty well, but I have yet to see anything productive from Pharaoh Brown at this point, at least not in the passing game. I mean, some run blocking, but there is no concern from defenses about what Pharaoh Brown's going to be providing as a receiver. So again, at least Noah Fant at least gives you some flexibility at that spot. So I was stunned by that move. And then finally, going back to the DK Metcalf situation, to me, and again, this is something we talked about last week. You want to talk for all those out there who say, oh, trade away DK Metcalf, then the proof is here now in the pudding that, if the Seahawks don't have number 14 on the field, they have no wide receivers that didn't scare the Buffalo Bills at all. Tyler Lockett, I think he had one catch for 9 yards or something like that. I mean, again, there's an awful lot of people you can criticize right now, but I think that's the biggest area of concern. I think the Seahawks right now is, again, the inability to run the football and, again, stop the run. But also, if you don't have DK Metcalf and Geno Smith basically putting this team on their back, then you don't have any type of consistent offense.
Look, you and I, we try to find positives. The only positive that I had, and this is coming out of the all-22s, the saying is it's never as bad as you think or it's never as good as you think. No, it was as bad as I thought it was. And when I rewatched the all-22, the Buffalo Bills kind of sat back. Hey, we don't have to worry about DK Metcalf. And look, the stats are misleading because of garbage time late. 15 of the 27 targets for Geno Smith were to tight ends or running backs, but a lot of that was late in the football game. Yep. And so it was frustrating to see they weren't taking advantage of that opportunity that they could attack the middle of the field against a third-string linebacker. Like, I just didn't feel – and they weren't able to take advantage of that because they couldn't win the line of scrimmage in the run game. Physically, the scheme stuff was not good, as I mentioned. So really the only winner in this game on offense was DK Metcalf. If I'm his agent – I have the film of this game when I go meet with John Schneider, and I'm like, hey, $30 million per year. This is the game here that I'm going to use as a negotiating ploy, because they just were not the same offense out there without him. Running the ball better would have certainly helped, but they missed number 14, and that was a huge loss for them. When we come back, we're going to go to the defensive side of the football, and believe it or not, I actually have some positives on that side. I don't know if Rob does, but we've got our Monday musings on the defensive side of the football. We're going to get to that coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Game Time. You shouldn't have to skip a car payment when you want to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and with their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Want to see the Seahawks against the Rams next Sunday at Lumen Field? You can get seats in the lower bowl for under $80 right now. Great seats without breaking the budget, and you can prevent a Rams fan from getting those tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right into the day of the event. And the game time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. So write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for listening in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Monday Musings, we normally reserve for one segment. But listen, there was a lot to talk about coming out of this 31-10 loss for the Seahawks to the Bills. Offensively, very little positive to talk about. Switching over to the defensive side of the football, probably not going to be much different in terms of tone and vibes because Seattle gave up 31 points in this game. They got gashed for 150-plus rushing yards. Again, Josh Allen was flinging the ball over the field. It was not necessarily a good performance on that side of the football either. And it felt like to me, Rob, that this was one of those games where you could look at the physical aspects that were hurting the Seahawks, but to me, this was one of those games where mental toughness really ended up being the undoing of the Seahawks starting in the trenches.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that, again, Buffalo took it right to the Seahawks. I mean, and I think that their willingness just to run the ball right up the gut against a Seattle squad that, of course, has struggled in run defense, I think it kind of just stole the any momentum that Seattle might have had from the crowd and, just the enthusiasm of this game. And, game was America's game of the week and Tom Brady is in the house and all this kind of stuff. And I think that there was a lot of buzz in the stadium early on. But I think, again, because Buffalo was able to sustain that long drive early in the game, it kind of, chipped away at any excitement that the Seahawks fans were having. And, one of the things that I thought really kind of maybe got into the Seahawks head, and I got to give the Buffalo Bills some credit here. Look, I was born and raised a Seahawks fan, but as I've got older and have worked a little bit more in football evaluation and scout now and all that kind of stuff, Corbin, I don't consider myself to be a fan of any one NFL team any longer. I'm a fan of good football and aggressive football. And out of the Buffalo Bills, called a beautiful game. And I'll just give you some examples here. I would argue that Seahawks' best defensive player right now is Devin Witherspoon. And many times, Devin Witherspoon was lined up one-on-one against Khalil Shakir, who is, as we talked about in the pregame stuff, was very much Buffalo's number one target. And they went after Devin Witherspoon over and over again, down at the end zone with a rookie. They went after Rick Woolen twice. And Rick Woolen, the first time, knocks away the ball, and a beautiful play by Rick Woolen to knock away the ball from Keon Coleman on a fade. And Buffalo goes right back to it, and he gets that touchdown. That's Buffalo basically saying to Seattle, look, we know who your best players are. Our guys are just better than yours. And if our guys are better than your best, then just wait when we flex on some of your weaker players. Buffalo didn't even throw the ball to their big standout addition, Amari Cooper, because they didn't have to. And that's, I think, what was weighing down on the Seahawks mentally and what led to some of the miscues and the fights and all that kind of stuff, because Seattle knew that they were getting Buffalo from the jump.
And I loved the fact that the Bills came right out. I'm with you. I just like watching good football. They came out in 12 and 13 personnel right off the bat. I mean, you look the first three plays. I was talking to our buddy Maz Vida, who was sitting next to me in the press box, and we've had him on as a guest a couple of times on our show. And after three plays, I said, this is going to get ugly because they were running the football behind their multiple tight end looks. It felt like when George Fant back in the day for the Seahawks, when they said number 74 is now eligible, the Bills were doing it with multiple dudes. They were plugging them in as eligible sixth offensive linemen. I mean, they came out and said, we are going to physically dominate you. And they were able to do it. And from a defensive standpoint in the run game, there's so many different directions I could go with this. The defensive line got out-muscled. I thought it was Byron Murphy's worst game by a very large margin. Physically was just beat down by the Bills' offensive line. The entire D-line, there were plays that all of the guys were just getting knocked multiple yards off the ball. The Bills physically came in. They punched him in the mouth early, and the Seahawks did not punch back. There was not that mental fortitude to fight back in this game. I could sit and ramble about that for a while, but I want to talk about the disconnect again, because that is the word that it just continues to pop up when I'm watching Seattle Seahawks football right now. We see it in the run game on offense. We are seeing it in the run game on defense. And you could make an exception for Ernest Jones. He had been with the team for 4 days. And honestly, without Ernest Jones, they would have given up 250 rushing yards in this game.
Yep.
He was the only one that was making plays. And I just watched the All-22 today, and double-digit run plays where the Seahawks had the defenders there to be able to gap out run plays. They could have had every single gap covered, but the alignment was the issue. You see safeties adjusting, but then the linebackers are not. And so even though the linebackers are supposed to take an A gap, for example, they're stacked behind the DT. And where do the Buffalo Bills run the ball? Where do they end up tracking it? Right at that A gap that the linebacker is not able to get to because they weren't shifting their alignment. And again, that to me, it's disconnect on the defensive side of the football from front to back. Your guys are not on the same page with their run fits. And this has been a chronic issue for this team all year long. And again, I'm not holding this against Ernest Jones. The guy's been here for 4 days. And he may be doing exactly what the team is coaching him to do. But if that's what they're coaching him to do, they got a real problem there, because the alignment stuff is killing them right now. And Buffalo was able to get to the edge. Their guys were physically dominant on that regard. I can count on one hand the number of runs where James Cook was touched within 5 yards after he got past the line of scrimmage. I mean, it was just too easy. It was stealing candy from a baby on Halloween week. That's exactly what we saw out there. But the alignment stuff, to me, that is the most concerning, because it's week 8. Your players at this point should not be having these issues with that disconnect throughout the defense, where it just doesn't seem like everybody knows where they're supposed to be. That can't be happening at this stage of the year. The missed tackles are frustrating. Getting physically owned up front, maybe that's just the state of the game, that Buffalo was just the better team. It wasn't an effort thing for the most part, just getting bullied. It happens. But the disconnect with the alignment stuff, that cannot be happening at this stage of the year.
Yeah, that was very alarming. And the thing is that some of the players that, or both the players that Seattle has just recently traded for, Roy Robinson Harris had a pretty solid game. He had at least a couple of tackles. And then, of course, the new linebacker, Ernest Jones IV, I mean, he had 15 tackles, easily the most of anybody on Seattle's defense. Look, I'm a big Jaron Reed supporter. And I love the leadership that he showed at the end there, where, of course, Derek Hall was pretty frustrated, and they got into it. And I thought that was veteran leadership trying to calm him down. But Jay Reed had 1 tackle, and that was an assist. Jonathan Hankins had 1 tackle. That was an assist. Boye Mafe, a guy who I think is an all-pro candidate, had 0 tackles, nothing. I mean, so again, you're the alignment is critical. But at the same time, it doesn't come out. It's not always the X's and O's. Sometimes the Jimmies and Joes have got to show up and play as well. And I just thought that from an alignment standpoint, from a physicality standpoint, from an execution standpoint, the Buffalo Bills just hand Seattle their lunch. And again, I tip the cap to the Buffalo Bills. Seattle's got to be better. I believe that they will be better this week against the LA Rams, but they absolutely have to. Otherwise, it is going to be as dire as some of those other Seattle area football fans and prognosticators out there are thinking that this is.
I want to end the show with a positive, because I do think on defense, look, there's not a lot of positives coming out of a game. You got blown out. But look, let's give some credit to the young defensive backs that got to step in. And listen, I loved what Mike McDonald said today. Trey Brown, you're in a competition now. Like, you've been out. I'm not going to just give you your starting job back. I mean, Josh Jobe had the only highlight on defense. That was a phenomenal interception. He read Josh Allen like a book on that play, and Seattle scored no points off of it. Like, that has to be incredibly frustrating for the coaching staff, that this young kid is coming here. I know he gave up a couple big plays. He gave up a 35-yard catch, but at least you're seeing some fire from the kid. He had a couple really nice tackles on the outside. He had that pick. He had 2 pass breakups last week. Look, I don't care if you're a practice squad guy. We're going to find a way to get you in the lineup if you are going to give us better results. And Trey Brown had some struggles before he got hurt a couple weeks ago. So Josh Jobe and Kobe Bryant, I can't say enough about the way Kobe Bryant's playing right now. And I know that he gave up a touchdown in that game, but he also deflected one from Dalton Kincaid. The first one that he gave up was because Josh Allen had 15 years in the pocket. You can only cover for so long. Kobe Bryant actually had pretty good coverage on that play up until the very end. He made some nice tackles in the run game. I think Kobe Bryant is playing really good football. So I'm going to close this show out with that. Look, there's a lot of things that are frustrating. This is a game that was very difficult to rewatch because the Seahawks did very little that was positive in this game. But Josh Jobe and Kobe Bryant, the guys that are plugged in the lineup that are spot starting right now, you can make an argument they were the two best players on Seattle's defense yesterday. They were playing really good football, and that's a testament to the study and the prep that those guys are putting in. Some of the teammates that are your starters, you might want to start following suit with what those two guys are doing because they look prepared to play. And unfortunately, a lot of guys on both sides of the ball didn't look prepared to play for the Seahawks yesterday. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, it's Tell the Truth Tuesday. We've got some more truth, some more wisdom to dish out 8 games into the season, some last thoughts coming out of this loss to the Bills, and then it is on to the LA Rams in week 9. We'll take a look at what's new with the Rams and what's new in the last 2 weeks for them with the health that they have at the wide receiver position. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.